Boom, 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 boom. A side, B side. What side are you on?
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A Side, B Side. How's it going, Adam?
It is going very well, Brooke. How are you?
Pretty good. I am a proud mama today. My youngest, I started when I was like 12, so I'm still
Yeah.
very young. And have my youngest has just graduated college. So she graduated with a double major. Yep, I'm going to brag on her.
You should.
Double major in psychology and sociology. So, wow. Can I just say, wow? I have two really amazing kids that I'm super proud of, and single mom, young single mom. And we did it because I'm going to take some credit in this.
You absolutely should.
So, yeah, really super proud. Got to do that today. And it was an in person graduation, but it was very, very small. The class was very small. I think not even 60 students. Plus, they did do masters, but I think there was only like six people that were awarded and hooded for their masters. And each student was only allowed two guests. The entire ceremony, the undergrad and grad, was a total of 50 minutes.
Which, I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially at a small university. I mean, I went to a relatively small university and we'd have two or three times that in terms of length and with choirs and maybe it's a little different in this, but that 50 minutes, I mean, you barely sat down at Concordia, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and they even said that they're releasing like a special commencement that highlights the typical things they do at commencement ceremonies, like the speech from the president and things like that. But in these unprecedented times, they did things a little different. And afterwards, I think a lot of people were like, yeah, I'm cool with this. Like even some of the professors were like, yeah, I mean, you spent 4 years listening to us. Why do you want to listen to us talk for 2 hours?
Yeah, I don't think that I'm breaking any confidences here, but my father was a college professor for 30, 40 years. I probably should know the exact date. But I know that those commencements were a lot of like sitting and they wear the big robes and those were not always the most exciting times. So I'm sure that the people that are most interested in them being shorter are the ones who have to go to ones every year.
Yeah. So that is what I did today. I don't know that I can top that this week, really.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to have your high point of your week on a Wednesday. That doesn't happen very often.
Right. Yeah. And it was going to be on a Saturday. Then they moved it to Friday and Thursday. And then it ended up Wednesday, whatever. So it's here. It's done. I got emotional. I mean, come on. It was my baby. And yeah, I'm super, super proud.
As you should be.
Thanks. What about your week?
It's been just more of the same up here. We had a lot of rain, and then today was gorgeous. So it was great to work and be on the patio and have people enjoying the sunshine. And then I took my dog for an hour-long walk, and we got back and we ate dinner, and she wanted to go on a walk again. So I had to negotiate. Yes, I negotiate with my dog who does not speak English, so it's very interesting negotiation. I will be going for a walk as soon as we are done recording as well, because she wanted to stay outside the entire time. But it's Minnesota can be really rough in the winters, but it has some pretty great springs, summers, and falls. So it is really nice today, and it definitely made my day.
Nice, nice. Have you watched any good things this week?
I'm still plowing through Elementary. I did watch the Oscars on Sunday. Brooke, did you watch the Oscars?
I did not watch the Oscars.
That's okay. Most of America did not watch the Oscars. It was the
Sadly, it
lowest
was
rated
the
ever.
lowest. Yeah, the lowest rated ever.
And I mean, I love the Oscars, but usually I've seen at least something. And this year, I don't think I had seen a single thing that had been nominated because it's been such a weird year. But one of the things that has been cool is all the streaming services have, I don't know why they didn't do this before the Oscars, but they're kind of highlighting all of their nominees in the last couple of days. So I've added a lot of things to my to watch list. The first of which is, and I've haven't had a chance to watch it in the last couple of days, but it is number one on my list, is the short film Two Distant Strangers, which won the
Oh,
Oscar for short film.
it's so good. It is very good, very intense, and
Yeah.
unbelievable that they were able to do what they did in 30 minutes.
Yeah, I am a bit embarrassed that I didn't even know it existed until the Oscars, which probably just speaks to my blinders that I have on about what I watch and whether or not I even see things pop up in my queue that I should. But it won the Oscar, and I'm like, wait a second, what do you mean there's a short film that deals with George Floyd? And I haven't heard anything about it living in Minnesota. So that was a bit of a embarrassing moment and also a motivator to figure out exactly why I haven't seen it and when I can see it. And then, of course, it was right in the top of the queue. So that is it. I've been trying to wait for the right mind space because I have heard it's really intense.
It is. Mm-hmm. But it's very good. Like, I mean, absolutely 100% recommend it. I recommended it to my mom and my stepdad, and they watched it. Well, I know my mom watched it immediately. I recommended it to another good friend because it's only 30 minutes. I mean, you can make you can make time for 30 minutes.
And I think like this is a thing I was thinking, that the way that media is consumed now with like more, like it's hard for me to get my 14-year-old and 16-year-old to sit down and watch a television show, or let alone a movie, because they just have got so much going on. They're not as interested. I'm wondering if the short film genre, like that area of film, is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger because it's more bite-sized for people to go and absorb, and a little bit more accessible.
Yeah. Well, Quibi was a thing for a bit, and it launched before the pandemic, but it happened to coincide with the pandemic. And it's that short. It was the whole premise of Quibi was short form or quick bites or whatever. And had we not been in the middle of the pandemic, I think Quibi would have blown up because, like you said, it's just a short form. Nothing was over 10 minutes for an episode or a movie or whatever. I mean, and it was just really easy to just get your fill of whatever. So I do think there is something to short form programming.
Yeah, and hopefully, like I had Quibi for like the first, like the first couple months, or like you got like a 3-month trial or something, and I watched a couple things on there, and it was easy to just get. It was good quality stuff, and it was easy to just kind of watch a quick episode and then go do something else. So I think the idea was there. Maybe the timing was wrong.
Yeah, I think it was. I think if the pandemic had not hit, Quibi would have been very successful.
Yeah, and maybe it can come back. I know they poured a lot of money into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had a lot of stars.
They had a ton of stars, and it was really good content. Like I think one of the better movies I've watched was one with Liam Hemsworth, The Most Dangerous Game, I think it was called.
Oh yeah. Yeah, which is a great book and has been made into movies before. And I remember seeing the trailers for that being like, oh, that should be really good. And then I didn't watch it.
It was very good. So yes, I agree. I think once this is all over and things are a little bit more normal, I think short form programming will be a thing.
I mean, it already is on YouTube. I mean, I've even gotten to the point where a lot of the time I'll sit down and be like, okay, I don't have time to watch an episode of something before work, but I'll jump on YouTube and watch something that's 15, 20 minutes that I wouldn't even thought of watching, a year ago. So
yeah,
even an old dog like me is starting to figure it out.
Um, also, this week I watched Thunder Force, which I'm gonna say I highly recommend. It is hilarious. Like
Yeah.
I knew it
Oh,
was gonna be dumb.
it looks funny. Yeah.
It is very like it's that stupid funny. You're not gonna go in and be like, "Oh, this is Oscar worthy." It's dumb, but it is hilarious, and you will thoroughly enjoy it. Like Melissa McCarthy. First of all, I never realized until this movie, and they were talking about it on Twitter and on Instagram, that Melissa McCarthy and Octavia Spencer's have been friends for like good friends for so long.
Oh,
I had
really?
no clue. Yeah, they've been good friends for years. And like Melissa McCarthy started talking about the movie and she was posting like old photos of them and stuff. And it was like, huh, who
Oh,
knew?
that's yeah.
But
Yeah.
Octavia Spencer is a great straight man to Melissa McCarthy's comic genius, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the sort of the wild and crazy, character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which she's played a lot of.
Melissa McCarthy?
Yeah, it's kind of her
That's her
jam.
deal. Yeah. She's good at it. I mean, that's her thing. She's like, if you told me Melissa McCarthy was in a serious movie, I'd be like, I don't know if I'm gonna watch that one, you know?
Yeah, she kind of reminds me similar to like Adam Sandler. Like what an Adam Sandler movie's going to be, and when he does the comedies and stuff, and you're like, okay, I know this is going to be kind of silly and over the top, and it's going to be, I'm going to enjoy it. It's probably not going to tax my brain too much, and then you go on, and he's just really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I highly recommend it. You just need like something that's going to make you laugh and be a stress reliever. Throw on Thunder Force. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, that's in my queue as well. So maybe I watch Two Distant Strangers and then I watch Thunder Force, and it's kind of like a
Palette
version.
cleanser.
Yeah, it's like the A side B side on Netflix. You get to see
Yeah.
you get two different things back to back that kind of like balance you out.
Yeah. Yeah. But I highly recommend both. Like I said, two distant strangers. I absolutely see why it won an Oscar, and Thunder Force is definitely going to give you some good chuckles. All right, so I guess not. I guess it is your time to go first this week. Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I sure would like to make a podcast. I've got so much to say about blank. Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, you really should. It is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. All right, I'm going to tell you why it's so easy. Okay, so with Anchor, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. And you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Trust me, I'm so excited about this. You can be too. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started.
It is. I am on the clock up first. And all of those phrases tie in with what I'm going to talk about tonight at the A side, and that is the draft. For me, athletic drafts have been one of my favorite moments of the year, and it all started back when I was a little kid in the 90s, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have always been horrible except for a very short period of time when Kevin Garnett was around and made them good just by pure will, were always drafting high in the draft because they were awful. So they always got this chance to get a new, shiny savior for the franchise. And I remember watching drafts all the way back to the early 90s when I would sit in my basement and I was super into basketball, and basketball was the perfect draft to get into because it was only 2 rounds. And all these kids had played college basketball at the time. And so you knew them and you had opinions about them. And it's grown from this thing that just kind of happened on a Thursday night into drafts becoming must-watch television. And NBA was the first one for me, but then the NFL draft has exploded over the last 10 years to the point where now they've spread it out over like 3 nights. It starts on a Thursday and then they do it again on Friday, and then there's more rounds on Saturday, all because of television. And it becomes a huge deal. And of course, the 2021 draft is happening this week. And by the time you're listening to this, the first round will have already happened on Thursday night, where a lot of the big drama happens. But then there's more on Tuesday, or more on Friday, and then more on Saturday as well. And as I've been diving into all of the draft coverage and the mock drafts and the stories behind the scenes and getting into the drama and thinking about last year's NFL draft was really unique in that the entire world shut down in the middle of March. And for most of April, there was no sport. I mean, there were no basketball games, there were no baseball games, there were no football games, there were no soccer games, there was nothing. Everything kept getting pushed back. And
it
was
took
just
them a little bit to figure it out.
Yeah. And part of it was, I mean, when I think about it, when I got the first notice that we were shutting down back in like March 17, I think, of 2020, we were under the impression we were shutting down for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then everything would be okay. And as that 2 weeks spread into a month and 2 months, and everything was getting canceled and pushed back, and like music hasn't happened live in like a year other than on Zoom. The first thing that I remember actually happening and not getting canceled was last year's NFL draft. It was a very different draft. They did it completely via Zoom, and it was super weird because you had all these, the general managers and coaches and owners in like their basements and offices and all spread out, and all the players were at their homes on Zoom. I remember we're watching it as I'm working in the restaurant, and we're doing to go, and there were 3 of us working, and we've got the draft on. And the most interesting thing was seeing these kids who are college kids. They're like 21, 22 years old, sitting in their parents' house, and their lives about to change, as opposed to them being in like, Madison Square Garden, all suited up and waiting for their name to be called. I remember last year, Joe Burrow, who was the number 1 pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, he came out of LSU. He was sitting in his parents' house, and his mom still had the plastic on their couch. And this kid is like about to become a multi-millionaire and like a face of an NFL franchise. He's just won the Heisman, and he's sitting there in his living room with his parents, and this couch that's got plastic on it, and it's just awful curtains. And one of my coworkers who wasn't a big football fan was just like, man, she's got to get some new curtains. Those are really, really bad. But it was this huge moment because it actually happened. And it kind of felt like a seminal moment in that, okay, things are really weird right now, but we can figure out a way through. Mm-hmm. And I think that the NFL draft happening last year helped lead a lot of the leagues into saying like, okay, we have to do something. Like, we can't just wait for it to get up better. We're going to have to do different things. We're going to, have to find a way through. And it encouraged everybody to do that. And it was very weird. I think one of my favorite moments is at one point they cut to the New England Patriots, Grand Poobah, head coach, director of everything, Bill Belichick, into his house. And he was literally he was supposed to be sitting at his dining room table with his laptop in front of him. And there's a camera on him, but he's not there. And his dog is sitting in the chair. So it looks like his dog is looking at the computer about to draft their next player. And it was great because then the entire internet was like, best GM ever. Who's a good boy? It was really little moments like that kind of led to things becoming real again. And now here we are a year later, and the NFL draft is back again, and they're doing a sort of mix where it's like last year the commissioner was in his own basement with a setup, walking up to the podium and announcing the picks. Now he's going to be in a event space in Cleveland, right on the river. They've got 3 different places that they're doing stuff, and there'll be people there. And one of the big things is like the player gets drafted, then he goes up and gives the commissioner a big hug. And there were no hugs last year. There was actually a press release last week that was like, hey, it's okay. The commissioner is going to be able to hug players this year. And we're like, why did we have to put a press release out for that? But people were wondering. So as I'm diving into all of this stuff and getting, like I have done, there is a website called Pro Football Focus, and you can go and do a mock draft. And I myself have probably done 100 mock drafts where I'm drafting for the Vikings, trying to figure out who they're going to pick, and the computer's drafting for everybody else. But the Vikings fans alone have done over 700,000 drafts. And then you imagine every single team has done those mock drafts. People are obsessed. And so it makes no surprise that this seminal sort of sporting event was eventually turned into a movie. And that movie came out in 2014. And anytime you are going to do a sports movie, one of the first people that you probably are going to think of about being in your movie is Kevin Costner.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Costner, of course, I mean, Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, Tin Cup. He made golf cool for a little bit, for Love of the Game. Evidently, he was in a bike racing movie that I've never seen called American Flyers. He was in a movie about cross country called McFarlane USA. So it makes complete sense that he is cast as the main character of Draft Day. What made Draft Day really unique when it was filmed in 2013 is the NFL has always been super protective of their product, who they'll allow licensing, what they will allow people to do with the logos, and whether they'll even let you, use their name and the team names and all of that information. And the NFL actually signed off on this movie. They said, yeah, you can use all the team names. You can, have access that you probably wouldn't normally have access to. They had Roger Goodell, the commissioner, was actually in the movie, and you could tell that he's acting, but he's pretty much just acting like it's the Draft Day, which he's done probably like this point, like 15, 20 times. So he's like, whatever. He pulls it off pretty well. But they have incredible access, which makes the movie a little bit more realistic. I don't know if you remember the classic Keanu Reeves film called The Replacements.
Mm-hmm.
So that movie was based off of the NFL strike in the mid 80s, but because the NFL didn't want anything to do with it, they have all these made up teams. Or as we talked about in a previous episode of the A Side, B Side, we were talking about some of the best sports coaches in movies. Any Given Sunday, another great movie about football, and arguably one of the best movies about football, has all made up teams because the NFL wouldn't sign off on being part of the movie. So that was kind of amazing that they even let this happen. But maybe somebody said, hey, it's got Kevin Costner, it's probably not going to suck. And the NFL was like, okay, we trust movies with Kevin Costner that are involved with sports. So it came out in 2014. It was directed by Ivan Reitman, and of course starred Kevin Costner. But it was actually a pretty impressive cast. You've got Kevin Costner as the lead character, Sony Weaver Jr. Jennifer Garner plays one of the Cap guru in the front office and also his love interest. You've got, as one of the draft prospects, Chadwick Boseman, who plays Vontae Mack. Then you've got some great character actors like Dennis Leary and Frank Langella, who plays the owner of the team. And as I'm doing research into Frank Langella and like all these different actors, turns out Frank, in 1996, left his wife of 19 years and started living and dating Whoopi Goldberg.
Yes, I remember that.
I had completely forgot about that. And just to make things, full circle, they met on the set of another sports movie, Ed, where Whoopi Goldberg becomes the head coach of the New York Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, Whoopi
Can I
Goldberg
just say,
in the
Frank
90s,
Langella does not, if you don't judge a book by its cover, I know, but does not look like a man that would leave his wife for Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming. But Whoopi had a very interesting 1990s in terms of...
Oh, yeah, because that was a Ted Danson era as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so she was with Ted Danson at one point, and then Frank Langella. So a lot going on there in Whoopi's background. Also, she's doing Star Trek, but also Ghost. Who knows? She's got a very interesting career. But yeah, way to go, Frank Langella. I didn't see that coming. He plays the owner of the team, who basically sets the entire draft day chaos in motion. He says to Sonny Weaver's character, and spoiler alerts for a movie that came out in 2014. Sorry, if you want to watch it, pause now, watch the movie, and come back in 2 hours and listen to the rest of the podcast. Frank Langella basically says, our team stinks and we need to make some big moves. And so if you don't, you're going to get fired. And then Kevin Costner, who, adding to the Hollywoodness of it all, his father, who was a former head coach of the team, had passed away like a week before the draft, and his mom is there on draft day with with his dad's ashes and spreading them on the field while he's like doing the draft. It was a very Hollywood moment. You're like, there's no way this would all happen at once. But it is an entirely enjoyable movie. It has a script which at times really lags. In fact, Roger Ebert at one point says all of the interesting performers can't save a dull script. Draft Day needs, Roger Ebert doesn't pull punches. That man goes like right for the nose. He says it would have been an entirely different movie. It needs the kind of witty dialogue that an Aaron Sorkin and Steve Zalian brought to Moneyball. And this kind of came out around the same time as Moneyball. And people said, well, this is kind of the football Moneyball because they're trying to do all the behind the scenes stuff and kind of show how the sausage gets made sort of thing. A lot of archetypes that feel a little bit too Hollywood and not enough interest and not enough dynamic. They don't really grow. It's just sort of, very stock characters. However, as he has always done, Chadwick Boseman does an amazing job in his role. And the script, even though it was kind of dull, is actually made a little bit better by one of the filming choices that Ivan Reitman makes. So there are a lot of times when you've got two characters that are talking to each other on the phone, whether that's Kevin Costner's character, Sonny Weaver Jr., negotiating with other general managers, or even talking to the players like Vontae Mack, who is played by Chadwick Boseman. They're talking to each other on the phone. And they do a split screen, which can feel very, 24, where you've got two people talking in their script and very kind of distant. But in the filming, maybe the arm or something like say Chadwick's on the phone and his arm is then just slightly over his side of the frame into Kevin Costner's side of the frame. So it gives this a little bit more intimacy between the two characters, even though the conversation is happening in two very different places. And it's one of those things where I think it didn't get enough focus because the movie didn't become a giant hit, but it's a very subtle move that can take something that seems very static and make it a little bit more dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little surprised that it hasn't caught on more, but to take something like that split screen, but have it kind of blend together was a really interesting filming technique that I totally missed the first few times I watched the movie. I actually did buy it on DVD a few years ago because I am old, and that's what old people do. We buy things on DVD because we're scared that there's going to be that moment when I want to watch it, but it's not on any streaming service. So I'm going to have to go back to the hard copy. And I don't want these streaming services to take away my favorite movies, which it's sad how often that fear enters into my life. That is why I have a 6-movie collection of Mission Impossible, as if those movies will never leave streaming services. There's never going to be the moment where Adam is like, I cannot find Mission Impossible anywhere. I really want to watch Mission Impossible 5, but thank God I've got it on DVD. Or the Ocean's 11 movies. Those are like on TNT every other day. So I could just naturally stumble upon them, but I have a box set of all 3 of the originals, but I didn't get the most recent one where they did the reboot with the ladies. So clearly I got to get that one on DVD as well. Draft Day was a mild commercial success. It was made for $25 million and it made $29 million. So they didn't lose money on it, but it didn't exactly blow up the box office. Part of that was it went up against Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and Rio 2, which there's not a lot of, you're not going to go after those two with a story about guys trading draft picks. It was, and this is one of my pet peeves about sports movies, is every time a sports movie happens, the sports media people and people within the sports journalism area have to then say, like, go and point out everything that's not realistic. They're like, oh, well, that's horrible form on the guy shooting there, or that trade would never happen because it's way too unrealistic. And then you want to be like, guys, it's a movie.
Right.
Like, back off a little bit. Let's just be happy that they're making a movie about something that, honestly, I think if you pitched it to anyone who's not a super sports fan or not, who isn't already have their DVR set for tomorrow night to watch the draft, you'd be like, boy, that sounds really boring. So you've got a movie about a guy who is literally deciding which person to pick next. So it's kind of like a giant version of picking teams on the playground. I was like, well, yeah, but you remember that when you picked teams on playground, there was drama.
Always.
Everyone did last year. Yeah. So it turns into in my opinion, a fairly enjoyable movie. It does a really good job of kind of showing you what's happening behind the scenes in terms of all of the machinations of trying to figure out who we're going to pick and why and where and how often. It's much more than just they played football well, and maybe their personality, maybe their background, maybe something that happened to them during a game that may influence them down the road. That sort of, back behind the scenes stuff is interesting. Now, do they make it a little bit more dramatic than it might be? Yeah. And this movie came out in 2014. And a couple years later, there was a moment that totally changed the draft. And there was a top prospect who, the day of the draft, I believe on Twitter, somebody leaked a video of him in a gas mask smoking weed. Oh. And it came out of nowhere. And nobody thought that this prospect was, that had any character issues. And all of a sudden, they started falling on the draft board, and that happened in 2016. So a lot of the media folks were saying about draft day, they're like, well, these bombshell things that Sonny Weaver finds out during the movie would never really happen in real life. And then in real life, 2 years later, they absolutely did. And it was Laramie Tunstall, who is now the left tackle for the Houston Texans. He had his Twitter account hacked, and somebody posted a video of him wearing a bong attached to a gas mask. So this happened while the top 5 of the draft was happening, and he completely fell down the draft board. And later in his career, he was traded in a horrible trade by the Houston Texans, which is why the Miami Dolphins have the 3rd pick this year, and I think like the 12th pick, or they did, and now they've traded back. But that clearly was something that could have happened. So saying it was unrealistic was not proven by reality. So draft day 2014, Kevin Costner, I would say it is his 5th best sports movie, because he's got a lot of them. Mm-hmm. But if you have ever been somebody who watched a draft night in the NBA or the NFL, watched all the coverage on TV, and have a hankering, and you've never watched draft day because it didn't get a lot of press and it wasn't a huge hit, I would say if you watched last night's first round, because you're listening to this on Friday or over the weekend, and you want a little bit more of that drama and excitement, to check out draft day, and you will not be disappointed. And if you're somebody who has no interest in the draft whatsoever, but just likes Kevin Costner and wants to figure out why a friend of yours or a significant other wants to spend 3 hours watching people in suits get picked and hug the commissioner, then it may give you some frame of reference as well. So it's got dual benefits.
All right. So draft day.
Yes.
And where is it available? I'm sorry if you said it, I missed it.
No, yeah, I knew you were going to ask that, because I was going to say it and then I couldn't find the thing, but I found it. So this is why you should buy the DVD like me, because it's available on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, but it's only available for $3.99. So from what I
Oh,
can find, it is not streaming for free anywhere. So if you're like me and you were paranoid and you got ahead of the game and you bought it on some Black Friday sale when you walked into one of those bins in Target where it's like 4 feet by 4 feet and 3 feet tall and there's just full of DVDs, and you feel like you're supposed to Scrooge McDuck and dive in and find the one you want. That's how I found Draft Day. I highly recommend that you check it out. It's definitely, in my opinion, worth the $3.99.
okay. All right. Awesome. So there you go. That's the A side.
That is the A side.
Okay. You don't need to break to take her out. You're going to wait until then. We're done.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till we're done because I'm just gonna take her for like I literally took her for an hour walk and then it's like prepping for this, and then I gave her food and she was already back by the door with the leash and I was like, no, we'll go after we record. So she only wants to go out because it's beautiful, not because she needs to.
Okay. Well, mine is not very long this week, so I intentionally picked one that was kind of short because I figured I'd be exhausted. So
Yeah. Like you said, even just an hour or so drive, it takes stuff out of you, and it's an emotional day.
yeah,
Even just being happy is, could be draining.
especially these days. It's like, wow, that's an unfamiliar feeling. No, I'm kidding. All right.
Well, and like being around all those people, like, yeah, you said it was only like 120, 200 people, but still, like, that's an entirely different experience when you haven't had it a lot lately.
That's true. That is true. And everybody's trying to, you're outside and then you're like, do I have to put my mask on? Do I need? Okay, I'm going to take it off. Well, I got to, it's kind of like that maneuvering, like, when do I need to have it on? When do I not? And, we're taking pictures and.
That's every dog walk. Like I've got the mask and then I'm like crossing the street to avoid people. And it's like back in the day, if somebody crossed the street, they saw you coming and crossed the street, that was like insulting. Right. Now it's like a sign of respect, but it's very weird. It's beautiful out. I want to be like, hi neighbor, but I'm like, hi neighbor, because I'm really far away. So
yeah. And if you like don't cross the street, you're like, man, you're rude.
Yeah, or like I'm trying to like put the mask on real quick while also holding the dog because she's just like, oh my god, a person! I haven't seen one of those in a while.
Yeah,
it's like I'm tired of this one I live with.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this week on the B side, my mom always says, "Are we going overseas?" Because whenever we go overseas, the stories always seem to have these wild twists and turns. I mean, they're all crazy, but I don't know what it is about stories overseas that just have like these wild, like that one Marie who ended up getting off, like she allegedly poisoned her entire family and walked away scot-free.
Yeah, basically just ran the clock out. They're like, "Oh, well, you're really old now. I guess we won't do this anymore."
Right. So that's what she means when she's like, "Are you going overseas?" Because it's always like, man, those are like really interesting.
And back to our first one with the guy that like got rid of his whole family and all the stuff in his house, and we still don't know where all the stuff went.
My goodness. We're almost a year later and you're still on that.
I'm just saying, you can't move all that stuff easy.
So we're not going overseas, but it is out of the country.
Ooh.
This story is from Canada.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is the story of Audrey Gagnon and Rosalie. So Audrey Gagnon was born in 1993, and she was a frequent flyer, if you will, now I am not great with French. I took Spanish in school, so forgive my accent. She was a frequent flyer at the Enfant Jesus Hospital, where she had to undergo psychiatric care for a really long time because she was diagnosed very early on with a personality disorder. Audrey's life began in turmoil from basically birth until the age of 6. She was in foster care because of her parents, both of whom were drug addicts.
Oof.
So Francois Godin, who's a prosecutor in our upcoming case, said of Audrey, she was placed in a family where she was the victim of physical and psychological abuse. The family she was placed with was biological. So she's taken from her parents and placed with another family who happens to be related to her by blood, and she was still the victim of psychological and physical abuse. She's a victim of PTS, which is post-traumatic shock. She began using drugs at a really early age, and she became addicted to hydromorphones, also known as Dilaudid, which is a pain reliever. So this addiction eventually led to her participation in a methadone program. Dilaudid is classified as an opioid. Defense attorney Marco Robert says, quote, since the birth of her daughter, she had done some form of recovery. I wouldn't tell you that she was exemplary, but things were getting much better for her. Now, we've mentioned a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and it's the B side, which means it's true crime. So you know something is about to happen.
Yeah, those aren't ingredients in a happy ending.
No. So on February 20th of 2018, Audrey, who really didn't have any family, so to speak of, took up shelter with her 2-year-old daughter, Rosalie, at the Marie Roulette house. According to prosecutor Francois Godin, after displaying rude behavior towards the members of staff, they kicked Audrey and, by association, Rosalie out of the shelter at 10 p.m. on the evening of April 12th of that same year of 2018. Mm-hmm. So Audrey then reached out to several people, but she didn't really have much luck. She was reaching out to people for a place to stay, but she didn't have much luck. So with nowhere to go, she finally ended up at a friend/boyfriend's apartment in Quebec City, along with her daughter, Rosalie. Philippe Menard was the friend, aka boyfriend, and Philippe left her alone in his apartment on April 17th, so that's 5 days later, to go visit with some of his friends. Audrey stayed back at the apartment because she couldn't find a babysitter, according to court documents. So Audrey, she drinks a few beers and she smokes a little bit of weed and she falls asleep on the couch by the time Philippe had left. After a while, she texts Philippe and she tells him, now there is some language and also trigger warning, there is some violence. So she texts Philippe and she says, the baby is fucking boring tonight. Later that evening, Audrey texts Philippe again and she says, this kid's a fucking pain in the ass at night. According to reports and statements, Rosalie had cried a lot that afternoon. Audrey eventually told Philippe that she had taken Rosalie to her mother's house and that she needed him to come home. Now remember, her mom, drug issues, couldn't really rely on her, had been in foster care. So doesn't really seem to make sense that she'd want to take Rosalie there.
Yeah, probably not a number one on the babysitter list.
Right. So according to the Crown summary of facts, now remember the Crown, like in England, we've talked about the Crown. It's like the prosecutors. The Crown summary of the facts was this. Audrey, in fact, did not take Rosalie to her mother's house. Audrey, fed up with a crying baby and not having the proper tools to deal with stress in a baby, and already having issues in life, killed Rosalie. According to the Crown summary of facts, Rosalie was stabbed multiple times by Audrey, who had a dagger. The dagger that she used was actually from Nazi Germany. The autopsy report revealed that Rosalie's small body had 32 head and back wounds. It was presumed that Rosalie, while unconscious, was in fact alive when Audrey stabbed her. The pathology report suggests that Audrey strangled Rosalie before stabbing her. After this murder takes place, Audrey then puts Rosalie in her stroller. She leaves the apartment. She then heads toward a park. It was the Therese Bonheur, but the stroller gets stuck in snow. Remember, we're in Canada. Yes, it's April, but I know, like Buffalo right now, like just the other day, my mom sent me a snowy picture. So
yeah, we had snow here in Minnesota last week.
So there you go. So snow in April in Canada is not a big surprise. It's not unusual.
No.
So the stroller gets stuck in the snow. So she takes Rosalie out of the stroller. She leaves the stroller and continues on with Rosalie in her arms until she gets to a garbage bin.
And this is all post-violence.
Yes. She then takes Rosalie's little body and puts it at the bottom of a green garbage bin. Then she drags that bin down the street a few blocks, abandoning it. And she returns to the apartment. She cleans up all the evidence of her crime and throws any and everything related to the murder away. Philippe notes that when he returned home, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. It was noted in court documents that after Philippe's return, he and Audrey had sex and went to bed as if everything was normal. The abandoned bloody stroller was discovered the next morning, April 18th, by a citizen who just happened to be out walking and found it. They called police. Police were able to track the stroller back to Audrey and, of course, paid her a visit. When police arrived, Audrey initially told them that Rosalie was staying with her uncle, Steve Gagnon. Now, remember, she told Philippe that Rosalie was with her mom. So already we're having contradicting stories.
Mm-hmm. Can't keep her lies straight.
Right. So they contact Steve and he says, no, that's not true. So they go back to Audrey with this information and she eventually admits to what happened. She admits to the previous night's events and she leads investigators to the garbage bin where Rosalie was located. Investigators look inside the bin and they find Rosalie wrapped inside of a blue blanket at the bottom. She was pronounced dead at the hospital. And of course, as we talked about, the autopsy result said that her cause of death was multiple stab wounds. Audrey was arrested on April 18th, 2018 at 4:15 p.m. by the Major Crimes Unit of the Quebec Police. Audrey was charged with second-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. She was also charged with causing an indignity to the body of a corpse, her daughter, Rosalie Gagnon. Audrey, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 14 years. She pled guilty to the second-degree murder of Rosalie on March 11th of 2020 at the Quebec City Courthouse. She also pled guilty to interfering with a dead body, for which she received 5 years, the sentences to be served concurrently. Audrey's guilty plea prevented the trial that was scheduled to start in April of 2020. So let's just point this out. Crime committed April of 2018. By 2020, she has already gone to court and been convicted. That's some due process.
No.
I mean, it's not quite as fast as what we just saw, the Derek Chauvin, but it's much faster than like a lot of cases we have seen and talked about.
Yeah, the wheels of justice do not often spin quickly.
It was never revealed where she got that Nazi Germany dagger, and whether or not it was a genuine relic or not. But if it was a genuine relic, it was one that she would have been able to sell, unfortunately, and received a lot of money for.
That's just crazy. Like, who has that just lying around?
And was there meaning behind using that said dagger? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's between that and the poor person that stumbled upon that stroller.
Yeah. Fortunately, it was just a stroller and not someone like opening their garbage bin and seeing.
Right.
Because I can't. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, but a blood-soaked stroller in a park?
Yeah.
That's some stuff of nightmares right there.
Yeah. So before sentencing, Judge Carl Thibault said, quote, "You have committed the irreparable. You took the life of your child, your own flesh. You have committed the most serious offense under the criminal code. Hopefully in time, you will heal your wounds, your inner wounds, and heal yourself." Judge Thibault explained that her criminal record, her age, her living situation, and her mental health were all factors in her sentencing. None of Audrey's family was present during her hearing. Now, Judge Thibault, like I said, he mentioned her criminal history. So in July of 2014, she was arrested for aggravated assault against her spouse at the time. In December of 2015, she was arrested for assault on a peace officer. In 2016, January, again, assault on a police officer. June of 2016, assault. And then the heaviest sentence was imposed on Audrey, 6 months. The heaviest sentence that she received for any of these was 6 months for her aggravated assault caused to her spouse in 2014. She had stabbed him 7 or 8 times, of course, proving that she knew how to wield a weapon. So, this is a story that is just about a year old. The conclusion of it is just about a year old. So, yes, she is still currently incarcerated. And again, she was not even eligible for parole for 14 years. So she's still got a good 13 years if she even receives parole.
Yeah, and you got to think with her background, good behavior is probably not in the menu.
Probably not. But there you go. That is the story of Audrey and sweet baby Rosalie Gagnon.
Got to wonder if there will be any investigation into how she ends up on the street that night.
You know, I mean, it's not really the organization's fault.
No.
You know, if she's in there and she's not following the rules, they have every right to.
And they've got other people to protect as well.
They do. Now, my only question with that is, could they have kept, I don't know how legally they would have done that, but could they have made an exception for the baby? But again, legally, I don't know how they would have made a case for that.
Yeah, can imagine keeping a child against a mother's will is a pretty good way to get your facility shut down.
Yeah. So I guess just to avoid it, to get her out of there, they say you got to go. Sadly, for that baby. But there you go. That is the B-side. We need something uplifting to end this on.
Yeah.
You like that I put you on the spot like that? How about
this?
I
was like,
I'll give you another. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the jokes, last words that happened to be jokes by death row inmates.
Yeah, famous gallows humor.
Yes. How about this one? Let's see. We talked about James French, who said, "How's this for a headline? French fries," which it's still pretty funny to me.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if you can call it a dad joke, but it's a dad joke.
Yeah. So how about Carl Panzram? Carl was a serial killer, a rapist, and a burglar. He claims to have committed 22 murders and more than 1,000 rapes. He was executed by hanging in Kansas on September 5th of 1930. His last words, "Yes, hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill a dozen men while you're screwing around."
Somebody was impatient.
He was an angry man, wasn't he?
Yeah. What do you have against Indiana?
And then Vincent Gutierrez, who was 18 years old when he carjacked his 40-year-old victim. He shot him twice. The crime occurred one morning in 1997 when Gutierrez and two friends intended to steal a red Mazda RX for parts. The victim was an Air Force captain named Jose Cabo, and he was shot while he was attempting to escape. Gutierrez was executed by lethal injection 10 years later. His last words, Where's my stunt double when you need one?"
Oh, hey.
Ba-dum-bum.
I will say one. Now, I don't know if it's a bright spot, but in the case of Audrey Gagnon, some absolute credit needs to go to that bystander who finds the stroller and doesn't just walk away.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like she cleaned everything else up. The boyfriend was no wiser. I mean, it's possible that without that stroller, without somebody investigating things and tracking it back to her, maybe, the trail goes cold. So
that's
true.
The
good news is that somebody saw something and they said something.
And you know what? We've all, you and I both have been in that miserable cold and that snow, and the stroller gets stuck, and she's probably like, "I'll just come back to this later. I don't have time." It's cold. Yeah. It's cold, like when it's snowing like that. And that's probably her thought. I'll just come back to this tomorrow. Nobody's going to see this. Nobody's going to find it. And then, boom, somebody finds
clearly
it.
Clearly she forgot about it. And it was the one thing that tipped off the police.
Yeah. All right. So there's another episode of A-Side, B-Side. Of course, you can always head on over to Apple and give us a rating and or review. Thank you to everyone who's done that so far. And if you haven't, we'd love it if you did. You can also head on over to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, A-Side, B-Side Podcast. You can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. We have social media. We have Instagram. We have a Twitter. We have a Facebook. No TikTok just yet, but I have a TikTok.
And as a gift to all of our listeners, I do not.
Let's see. We have merch. That's a great way to support the podcast. You can get yourself some merch. Another way to do that is you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/asidebsidepod.
And you can always like and share any of our posts on Instagram, Facebook, or even if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can share those as well. So sharing is caring.
Absolutely. And let us know where you're listening. We'd love to know. You can tag us on Instagram or Facebook, Twitter. Let us know where you're listening. And if you have a story for either Adam or myself, let us know. Hit us up on our social medias, and we would love to cover it.
And if you let us know where you're listening from, and it's a place I don't know how to pronounce, you will find out how I pronounce it.
Which will be incredibly wrong. And again, sorry for Adam's lack of Magna Carta knowledge from a couple weeks ago.
Still feel bad about that. Being the American who are like, we invented due process. Right up there with salsa and pizza.
Oh, man. All right. So there we go. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Brooke.
As always, thank you for listening to A-Side, B-Side podcast. If you enjoy the show, please, if you don't mind, head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And if you'd like to continue to support the podcast, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, or you can buy us a coffee, as well as buying merch on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. From Adam and I at A-Side, B-Side podcast, please remember to wear your mask, social distance if you're around people that don't live in your household, and just be safe and happy. Thanks again from us here at A-Side, B-Side podcast.